So you should be able to share.
All right. So if everything's working, you should see a title slide that says HII's Pace Prototyping Approach.
Yeah, we can see it.
All right. So this is a relatively quick overview. It's just trying to connect the work we're doing and the tool set we're working from with the discussions we've been having in Pace up to this point, so that when we start using certain terminology, people will have at least seen it before. Um, and our game here is to focus on very basic attribute collection use cases. We're very much thinking crawl stage. The goal is to test interfaces, both our own and against anybody else that wants to bring an implementation of any piece of this. And we're happy to take input. The other thing I will do is share a link in the chat after I'm done with for the in development posture attribute collection actuator profile that we're building to, which at this point is, thanks to Dave Kemp's contribution of things, is getting pretty close to a complete first draft. So this is entirely review. This was a diagram developed primarily by Duncan, but I think I threw some tinkering in along the way, of the basic interfaces for software bill of materials retrieval use case. So an external decision-making component says, hey, I want an SBOM for components X. Posture collection service takes that command, gets those SBOMs, sticks them in the attribute repository, and responds back saying, I did it, here's where you find your data. So if I lay this down kind of in an OpenC2 defined context, and rearrange the terminology a little bit just to be easier to speak, that decision-making component I have labeled an upstream producer. So producer is the OpenC2 term for something that sends commands. So that upstream producer is outside. It uses the posture attribute collection actuator profile to command then an intermediate element we're labeling an orchestrator consumer, and that is functioning in our approach as the posture collection service. So that orchestrator consumer takes commands from above, sends commands on down below to downstream consumers using either other OpenC2 actuator profiles or other mechanisms entirely that are non-OpenC2. And then it uses a posture attribute repository to store its results. So this is kind of the overall, 10,000, 5,000 foot view picture of what the concept is. So we're making some assumptions here to simplify our life a little bit. The first of those assumptions is that all of the commands from upstream are submitted using the posture attribute collection actuator profile, and that pack AP is never used downstream. And the reason this is a useful simplifying assumption for us is it strips away any need for logic to say, I got a command under this particular actuator profile. Do I do this or do I send this on down, or both? And that logic's kind of complicated. So if we can skip over that for now, we make our life easier. So then our intermediate orchestrator consumer, our posture collection service, will accept commands under pack, and it will send commands downstream using other OpenC2 actuator profiles, for example, the SBOM actuator profile, or other mechanisms such as invoking OS query. Again, this is a prototyping effort. We're looking for quick, easy, low cost. None of these things necessarily represent the way a fully fledged PACE implementation would work, but they get us through a prototyping phase, we believe, pretty efficiently. Our second simplifying assumption is that we're just going to assume that when we get a command from upstream, we're going to try to execute that command against all the downstream consumers we've got. And the simplification here then is there's no need for that upstream command to try to specify what consumers are of interest in any way. We're just going to assume for this short-term prototyping effort, it's everybody. We may or may not get results from everybody, but we're at least going to make the attempt to translate that command received under the pack AP into something we can execute with all of our downstream consumers. So HII has been supporting the OpenC2 effort and developing prototyping software for a good long while, and we have existing components. And they number basically three. Two of them fit into what we call the OpenC2 Integration Framework, or OIF. And there we have an orchestrator, which is a device that serves the OpenC2 producer role. It can send commands. And then we have the OIF device, which serves the role of OpenC2 consumer. We also have another piece of software called Yuki, which is basically a shim to wrap around cybersecurity functions and enable them to receive OpenC2 commands. Now, the OIF components are both schema driven, so they need to be loaded with a suitable JSON schema for the commands they're going to send and for the commands they're going to receive and process. Yuki is not schema driven, so its implementation approach is a little bit different. And we anticipate that we'll be used both Yuki based and OIF based downstream consumer implementations. For the attribute repository, we're going to go the easy way out and just use Elasticsearch as a storage mechanism for now. I know other people are looking at other attribute repository approaches, and time and capacity permitting, we'll be happy to try to interface with those. But within our own little universe here, we're going to use Elasticsearch as a straightforward prototyping tool. Now, the interesting bit in all of this for us then is the thing in the middle labeled the Orchestrator Consumer. The OIF Orchestrator, as built to date, is strictly an OpenC2 producer. And so our main prototyping challenge in this effort right now is to add a layer of consumer functionality onto the OIF Orchestrator. We can use our off-the-shelf orchestrator as the upstream producer, and that's easy, right? We use an OIF orchestrator, we feed it a pack actuator profile schema, and we're good to go to send those commands. But the one in the middle now needs to accept those commands, translate them to other commands, keep track of what it's doing with upstream commands so it can eventually send responses, and those are the enhancements we're working on for the OIF orchestrator in order to make it serve this role in this prototyping effort. So we're planning, sorry, I had a pop-up distract me. There's three actuator profiles then involved in this. There's the SBOM actuator profile and the pack actuator profile, and both of those are what I'll call official actuator profiles, which is to say we are progressing them toward becoming committee specifications under the OpenC2 Technical Committee in OASIS. And then more internal to our effort, we're producing an actuator profile to let us leverage OS query. And it's just we need something to interface to it. And because OpenC2 is what OIF does and what Yuki does, it makes sense to us to package OS query commands into some OpenC2 form. But because this is so very tool specific, we don't plan to progress this as a spec under the technical committee in the way the other two are. The SBOM retrieval actuator profile is somewhat in very early stages at the moment, so there's some uncertainty with how we're exactly going to handle that, and we're still working that out. The pack actuator profile, my team's been developing text for that. That text is now in a fork on GitHub of the OASIS document for that, and as I said, I'll put a link to that fork in the chat right after I'm done here. So that is making progress. But as I say, the so-called OS query actuator profile is purely internal. So that's what I've got. That's an overview of how my team's approaching our preparation for the PACE and the upcoming June cybersecurity automation workshop event. Happy to entertain any questions.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Duncan said he might be late. You know, it's mostly your team and me here.
Well, Sarah and Abdul might have questions. Who knows?
Yeah. So, yeah, thank you for laying that out, you know, clearly in the presentation. That helps, certainly helps keep things straight for who's doing what.
Yeah, and so Sarah and Abdul, I also shared the same presentation with an OpenC2 working meeting last week, in order to keep both sides of this, the PACE side and the OpenC2 side, kind of consistently informed as to where we're at.
Good to know. Do we know how late Duncan's gonna be? I'm just asking because of his pull request. Admittedly, I haven't really looked at this. Okay. Would people prefer I open it an actual listening to better?
And Duncan says, quote, a few minutes late. So not much help there.
Oh, this is old. Okay. Hmm.
What is going on here?
Well, this one was open 14 days ago. And it hasn't been touched, so I think we can start with this one.
Yeah, I think that's probably already addressed in the architecture now.
Yeah.
We had mentioned that, and there is a fourth use case in the architecture that's just labeled retrieve vex information. And I don't know why the title was just retrieve vex, but the subject is retrieving anything from the PAR directly from the PAR rather than going through the PES. So as long as the description in the architecture rather than just the headline is what is meaningful, then this can be closed. Because I think the architecture does have that diagram that allows direct retrieval from the PAR. Duncan.
So apologies because I came in late. So I know we had the discussion of the direct retrieval or direct putting in the par. Have we had the discussion of the direct taking out of the par on the architecture side?
Well, so that's why I created this issue. But then when I looked at the architecture, there was direct retrieval of vex, is what the headline said, from the par. So that diagram already existed in the architecture. I assume that you created that.
I might have, but I might have created it early, and the intent of it might have been just to, hey, for everywhere we have an S-bomb, we have to have a vex, or we should have a vex. But then in subsequent discussions, because of the whole security issues associated with writing and reading the par, I thought we ended up with all of the writing of the par going through the PCS and all of the reading of the par going through the PES, so that we didn't need to, so that the originator of the command didn't need to know where, well, if I'm asking for what they asked for already, I get it from the par. But if I'm asking for something that's a transmutation like SPDX to Cyclone DX, I need to go through the PES. And so for both security and I'll call it ease of addressing issues, I thought we ended up with everything going in through the PCS and out through the PES.
Okay, so that's why I created this issue.
Yeah, and I don't know if our architecture has caught up to the statement I just said.
Right. So what for the security issue, then yeah, the last bullet here in the issue is that it's only readable. It cannot modify the content of the par. In order to insert information into the par, it has to go through the PCS. If you want to take par data and transform it somehow, then yes, that would be a PES function. But I still think that a read-only interface for data that has already been stored in the par using a par API, I believe that direct retrieval is also beneficial.
So the originator of the command needs to know, for example, if the, I don't know, Blinky S-bomb is in CDX or SPDX, before he asks for it in SPDX, to know whether to ask the PAR or the PES. That doesn't seem right.
Right. No. First, the PAR is not an OpenC2 interface. We said we haven't picked.
I disagree with that. I have said since the beginning and continue to say it will be an OpenC2 interface.
Okay. Well,
or it won't be exposed, one or the other.
I continue to disagree with that. So, and we're working on prototyping now, and so you can query the PAR directly now and find out what you have.
In your implementation, and we agree to disagree, it doesn't mean your way's right.
No, it doesn't. And what we agreed was we weren't going to pick a winner. And so, yes, this is a suggestion for something that might be useful, but we're certainly going to demonstrate it. And that the demonstration will answer your question. If a Cyclone DX has already been stored in the PAR, then you can retrieve it. If a SPDX has already been stored, you can retrieve it. You can't retrieve a Cyclone DX in SPDX format because that conversion is something that you'd do through the PES, I guess. You'd need some kind of active transformation to happen for that for that to happen. But
Right.
the state of the PAR, the data that is stored in the PAR, can be examined and returned.
Okay. I mean, I again think it puts more, I think architecturally it puts more of a burden on those outside the system to know which part of the inside of the system they need to address. But I don't have an issue with, well, of course you can get at the information. I'm just sort of for the standard interface from the outside, I would prefer the OpenC2 interfaces.
And my long-standing objection is that we don't want to duplicate all of the functionality of general purpose retrieval interfaces within OpenC2, and there's a lot of capability there that.
But again, looking at the purpose of PACE to get security posture, I am for attempting to determine what the functionality you actually need and to ask for it.
Yeah.
To get the indexes and lots of gory details, who cares? You're really asking, I mean, my opinion is what most real use cases need from the PACE system is information from the evaluation system.
Yep.
That's its purpose. So again, we got to go through a lot of details yet to figure it out, but I just don't want it assumed that direct interface is the only way to get the information, because I think the long-term optimal focus needs to be on the PES, and I think architecturally it will be different based on that, because I don't like having the outside world having to send some commands to this one, but some commands on that one based on state information it didn't have ahead of time, so it'd have to ask for it. But we'll cover those later.
Yeah, we can pick a winner later. I think the advantages of.
I don't think we'll
winner.
ever need to pick a winner.
Yeah.
Because I think the PES and PCS interfaces are all you need, and we definitely need to pick winners there, and they're OpenC2.
Yes.
Sorry for the distraction, but I just wanted to make that clear. Over.
Okay.
So do you want me to move this in or close it out?
I'd say leave it open, because I think we got to make sure the architecture is consistent with even what it says. So.
Excuse me. And then this was from
question
oh,
about
go ahead.
current use of our prototyping efforts for getting SBOMs into a PAR. There was mention that PCS wouldn't be able to respond back, but that would be a function of the PES. Would a PES be required for a simple collection activity of this kind?
So say a little bit more. I mean, you could argue a trivial PES is just asking for what you already put in. I mean, is it an architecture question or a function question you're asking?
I'd say some of both. If a PES isn't required at all for things such as gathering SBOMs, simple posture data, then the functions would be out of the PCS. Otherwise, we need to make sure that it has a PES, even a very simple one, to answer the questions that get sent to it. If they need to be separate, then there needs to be a separate version that is made.
So I guess I'm against PES putting in, so there's functional and there's systems. Functionally, I'm of the opinion extracting information out of any of this stuff is a PES function. Obviously, Dave and I disagree on that. But it's either a PES or a PAR function. It's not a PCS function. So inputs clearly on the C side. My opinion, outputs on the E side. but output could be on the repo side in Dave's architecture. But functionally, in either of those cases, getting anything out is not coming from the PCS. Now, you might have a system, it's a one piece of software, and you say, hey, you can put stuff in, you can store it, you can pull it out. Well, then you have that, and let's say, just to make this a simple case, you do have the ability to put in an SPDX and put out in CycloneDX. That's just, you just run the CDX CLI command and do it. Since you put that functionality in, you may have put it in your input code. You might decide on your way into the system, you get given either a CycloneDX or an SPDX, you always store both of them. You take the one, convert it to the other, and always store both, okay? And then you can pull either them out by just literally pulling them out of the database. If you were to, that's an implementation detail, you could choose to do it that way. If you chose to do it that way, you might have one, what you think of as your PCS software. It's just one piece of software and it does that thing. But from a architectural functionality viewpoint, sort of the IACD different functions or go in different functional boxes, that transmutation function of turning, running a simple CycloneDX command to convert SPDX to CDX is a PES function, okay? So that just means your software has some PES function in it. You've combined them, that's okay. It doesn't mean it's a PCS function. It's still a PES function. It just, you put both of them in one piece of code.
This makes a lot of sense. What if, for example, though, we didn't want to evaluate and split this SBOM into all the different versions first? I agree that I think I can see that any transformation of SBOM data or posture data would be PES related. If it's simply collecting it from an endpoint and then returning to the decision maker that was collected, no transformations going on. It's just the function that takes it and stores it is sending an ACK officially, like not officially.
Well, sending an ACK is part of putting it in. Sending the data to anybody else is not part of collecting. That's just not a collecting function. Dave would argue it's a retrieval from the repository. I'd argue it's an evaluation function, but I think we'd both argue it's not a collection function.
Well, no, we're writing an actuator profile now, and the response, as we have defined it, when you collect it, you can return it. It's not just an ACK.
But you're returning it to somebody who already knew it. The use case is, what if it's for someone else? What if Dave wants Blinky and Duncan wants Blinky out? The Duncan wanting Blinky out is not a PCS function.
No, the PCS, the decision maker is talking to the PCS, right? Decision maker says, collect the Blinky SBOM.
Right.
The PCS goes out and collects it and stores it in the PAR. But what is its response? It can be either, yeah, I stored it in the PAR, or yes, here it is. Here's what I collected, not translated in any way.
I'm fine with both of those, or PCS functions.
Okay.
On a separate command at a later point in time, from that decision maker or any other, or from the PCS, you said, hey, give me a copy of that thing you stored. That's not a PCS function.
Right.
Which is what I thought his question was.
Excellent. No, it was just a very simple version of, I wanted to take a thing out from an end device and store it and know that it is stored.
Right, and possibly get a copy back.
Yes.
So the decision maker says, hey, go out to Blinky, grab its SBOM, and either just tell me you got it, tell me you didn't get it, tell me you got it, or go ahead and give me a copy. Those are all, I agree, that's all PCS.
I was mostly concerned that, I think somewhere up about 10 minutes ago, the mention was that all the responses were handled by the PES. I'm like, oh, do we need to make sure that there's a separate PES that does all the responding, or can PCS respond to, I have successfully collected this material?
No, mine was more the issue of if not the person who asked you to go find it, later in time, either the same or a different decision maker, or the PES itself, because it wants to do some evaluation, need that information you've stored. So there's a Gazinta and there's a Gazouta. PCS is associated with the Gazintas, And yeah, the axe and giving a copy because you were getting it as you did it, that's all just part of hacking, in my opinion. But that's all useless. That's a one-way in. Okay. You somehow have to get it out. And the get it out is either directly from the PAR in Dave's model or always from the PES in my model. But there's, and even in my model, the PES still has to talk to the PAR. So there's still, somebody has to talk to the PAR to get the data out. So that not as part of input, as part of anything else other than input function of getting it out has to come either directly from the PAR or from the PES. That was my only point.
I think I'm done stirring the pot now. Now that Jerry's fully angry with me.
No, that was a good question. Thanks. And yeah, so I agree with the output as Duncan stated it. You know, the PCS can return a result as part of collection at the time of collection, and PAR is still on the table.
So as I stated earlier, I didn't get to go through the issues since I was out last week to continue updating the FAQ. Are there any other issues here that we should revisit today?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm sort of changing the subject, I guess. Sarah, was CIS's intent to participate in the call at all? I didn't know whether Adam was going to, have software that we're going to try to test, or is your function sort of just administrating these meetings?
That's a great question. I have yet to have that discussion with Adam. It's been very difficult to get time with him, and unfortunately, as I stated, was out last week and I'm going to be out this week. But I can touch base with him on Monday because I do have a meeting set with him to determine that.
Yeah.
But there hasn't been much discussion about that, so I don't know the answer.
Yeah.
My guess is we wouldn't want to just be, hosting these sessions. We would want more involvement, but I would need to sit down and talk to Adam.
Right. Okay. Thanks.
Could I hitchhike on that since it was brought up, since the cybersecurity automation workshop got brought up? Sort of related to that direct question, not just from Sarah and Adam's viewpoint, but anybody else who might care's viewpoint. There is this sort of concept at the workshop of, well, first of all, you can just attend, and registration closes on the 19th, which is like 10 days from now. So you are thinking of attending either virtually or physically, and PACE will be a major focus of it. If you look at the sweat equity already signed up for by people, there's a really lot of PACE stuff in it. And I know of at least 4 other, I believe, PACE related organizations that are going to bring stuff. They just haven't put stuff on the sweat equity page yet. So 2 points there. One, go ahead and sign up if you're thinking of attending either physically or virtually. And if you are thinking of providing what we call the sweat equity, you're going to bring some software, you're going to bring some SBOMs, you're going to bring some use cases, whatever you're going to help somehow. Then besides picking a sweat equity ticket on that link that I just put in the chat, go to that list of companies and add your company or email me to add it. I sent the link directly to the web page, but the web page is made from a GitHub Pages page that there's a link to it on there that you can just put in pull requests. And we are sort of getting down to the wire. We really would like the sort of been holding off on having another meeting until we figured out who's actually doing stuff. And there's a whole bunch of people telling me they're doing stuff, but they, in just the last couple of days, they've gotten a few more to put them on that page. But we really need everybody else to do it so we can go ahead and have the friggin' meeting and decide, how we all talk to each other to the extent we can. But there are some, what I'll call commercial, there are now, I think, 5 commercial PACE vendors, at least in theory, bringing demonstration products to show how they interact with each other. And again, we'll have to make a lot of use of hand waving to get them to interact with each other. But it should help a lot in developing these use cases that we're talking about now. But so not just CIS, but anybody else in the call, please register if you're going to go. If you don't know whether you're going physically or virtually, make your best guess. Please only register once, not more than once. A bunch of people are registering for, being both sweat equity and not sweat equity and physically present and not present. Just pick one, whatever you think is the most likely one you're doing, and then switch it if you change your mind. But more importantly, if you are thinking of participating in the, hey, let's get stuff talking to each other, or at least, hand waving, talking to each other, please get your information to me as soon as possible. Over.
So I have a question over here, Duncan. Thanks for this. I would definitely be interested in sort of looking at PACE from a continuous monitoring perspective, like a use case that I'm working on basically at my workplace, right? Like and using it for a whole bunch of things. So like I would like to understand if there's interest basically in extending PACE to sort of using it for continuous monitoring at scale, and if no one else is sort of like taking it up, like this is something that I would be definitely interested in.
So let me give my personal opinion of an answer to, well, first I'll say thank you, but then give a personal opinion of whether it's PACE or not. The best way to tell is to go ahead and put a PR in against the PACE use cases and put in the use case you're thinking of, and we can sort of argue. I mean, the use case is clearly a cybersecurity automation use case, so it's clearly within scope of the workshop. Where is the PACE boundary? What part is PACE's job, and what part is other parts of whatever system we're doing's job? I think we'd have to sort of see that use case and to know, because again, we are trying to sort of stick to the functional boundaries. But again, we don't, maybe it all is in PACE. I don't know enough about what you're saying yet to do it. So if we could encourage you, well, 1, to sign up for the workshop, 2, put your use cases both on the PACE use cases and on the workshop use cases, because they're clearly, within scope of the wider automation. And then we can sort of argue about, like as an example, in previous meetings, we talked about, hey, is asset management part of PACE or not? It's clearly part of the PACE use case. You can't, to say that, hey, this vulnerability affects this software is sort of meaningless unless you say, because it affects this product that I have in these locations. So that this product in these locations part is clearly an asset management function. Is asset management part of PACE or not? Well, it's a different function. So let's just for now call it outside PACE, because SaaS and ServiceNow and 900 other systems know how to do asset management. It's needed though. So at least for now, let's at least define the interface to it so we can get the information we need. And maybe over time it will involve, will end up inside us. It's too soon to tell. But it's clearly a different function, the function we have. So what you just said maybe is sort of just inside PES, and it's just another function of PES, or maybe it's no, there's systems outside that do this, and they just ask PES for this information, and then they do the actual continuous part of it. I'll say that's to be determined, but we sort of can't do that unless we you write down this is how I think it works, and then we'll do that. Is that so? Can we sort of turn it around and make you write the stuff down a little bit?
Yeah, no, definitely. I can take that back. So in terms of like the use cases, like where in the repository are we capturing all these existing use cases? If you can point that out to me.
Sure, Sarah, could you, I think it's up 1, I think it's actually called use cases, up 1 from where the base, you have to go to the plain old, go to the code button. And then, oh no, it's in docs. It is down one. Then it's in docs. And then it's in use cases. And being honest, we have a lot more in our heads and we talk about these meetings than we've written down here. We're getting better. That's why we just, sort of had the conversations we just had on the architecture and stuff like that. But there is at least some stuff in there, and there needs to be more. And the automation workshop also has almost an identical structure to it, except for it's not under docs. Its use cases is, I think, right under the main repo piece. And there's some stuff in, like, I know on stuff I've done some of it in Pace and some of it in Con. I haven't made them consistent, so I apologize. I just have been doing too many things. But to the extent anybody can find anything and put it in, this is sort of where it belongs.
Thank you. I mean, I can take that back and create something for continuous monitoring.
Right. And refresh my memory, because I apologize, I lose track of everything. Where are you? What organization are you from?
So I'm at Arctic Wolf. I'm leading the AI machine learning roadmap over there for continuous monitoring, risk management. So essentially detection and response and security awareness.
Oh yeah, we definitely want you at the well, certainly we want you to continue working here. Please do, because it definitely does tie into the use of the posture assessment. But we definitely want you at the workshop as well. Because are you familiar with value stream management at all? The value stream management crowd's going to be there as well, and your stuff sounds like it plays right. You sounds like you are the connection between us and them. So that would be great.
I'm not too familiar with value stream management. If you can point, perhaps I can look it up, or if you have a link.
Google those 3 words and you'll find. And there's a new Oasis TC being formed to basically standardize the interfaces to it. But it's basically how to show the value to the business. And one of the use cases that they're using is vulnerability management is a good use case to show how to make business trade-offs based on risk decisions. On, you only get so much money, you only get so many resources. How is it you decide which ones to fix when and stuff like that? So very early stages, but this stuff and that stuff the tie between the two is basically the evaluating the relative risks. It sounds like that's what you do. So
yeah, no, definitely. So my work is across the stack, basically, in detection and response, risk and all, and a whole bunch of optimizing the SOC as well. So like what we are doing, this value stream management that you mentioned sounds pretty relevant and interesting. And then Pace is relevant from let's say, like obtaining and curating the data perspective as well. And I guess another group that's another OCA working group that's pretty relevant to me is the whole cyber ontology stuff, where that's something that I think could be part of the posture evaluation service, or the PES, right?
And there's sort of two, just because these tentacles go out everywhere, there's sort of two aspects of that. One is OCA has an ontology group, so the Open Cybersecurity Alliance, which Pace is a project in, as an ontology project. You probably want to touch base with that. There's also in an Oasis TC called the Threat Actor Context Technical Committee that makes heavy use of ontology to do, I think, similar to what you're talking about. So you probably want to touch base with them as well. And one more to add to your list that's of near and dear to Pace's interface, but also near and dear to some of us, particularly me on this call, because I co-chair the committee along with Mike Rosa, who usually attends today but is injured, is OpenC2. So sort of the command and control interfaces to tell devices or analytical engines or anything else what to do. If you make decisions, you then have to tell somebody to do something. The tell somebody to do something part is usually done with Cacao playbooks, and those Cacao playbooks have OpenC2 commands in them. So if you're not familiar with either OpenC2 or Cacao, we can we won't waste more Pace time on it, but we can bend your ear on that sometime too, because we'd love for you to have those interfaces as well.
Awesome. No, that sounds great. Unfortunately, Arctic is not part of Oasis, so I'm not sure. I mean, if there's a way I can attend, like, let's say, like some of those Oasis technical committee meetings, I would.
No, unfortunately, Oasis will make you pay to attend them. They are open in the sense you can look at all their answers afterwards. Many of the participants, like myself, Dave Kemp, some others, will probably welcome talking with you one-on-one and bringing you up to speed. And then if we like whatever we see, or you have some neat ideas, we can insert them as our own, but we have to do it as our own. So there's intellectual property and everything else, bugaboos there. So obviously Oasis would like you to just, pay up and join. But Pace doesn't require that, and Pace does have OpenC2 interfaces. So for example, if you were to do some Pace use cases that have what you need and say, hey, you need an OpenC2 command to do that, then in the Pace, we can have all that discussion here as part of Pace. And then some of us, like Dave and myself, can say, hey, we were over at the Pace meeting and we think we need the whatever interface. So I don't want to blatantly skirt the rules, but I think we can legally work a lot of the at least Pace related OpenC2 issues here in this meeting. And then we'll
No, that sounds excellent, Duncan. So I'll reach out offline to schedule something with you then.
Great. Sorry, Sarah, we sort of hijacked getting off onto Automation Workshop, but
that's totally fine. That's totally fine. I am registered, but I am attending virtually. I will put that out there. But like I said, I will talk to Adam on Monday and we'll find out more. Was there anything else? Because otherwise we are over time. So, but I don't want to. If there's anything else anybody else had. All right, I will take that as a no. So I'm going to stop recording.
Yeah, nothing else. Thank you, Duncan, for reminding about the use case.